Just hours after the first Briton with coronavirus left this hospital, another patient checked in.
The latest UK case of coronavirus is the first to be contracted within the country rather than abroad.
We have a new name for the coronavirus. The World Health Organization has officially called it COVID-19. Co for corona, Vi for virus, D for disease, and 19 because it started last year.
It's clear that coronavirus, COVID-19, continues and will continue to spread across the world and our country over the next few months.
The Prime Minister has announced the most drastic limits to our lives that the UK has
all over the world,
ever
we're
seen
seeing
in
the
living.
devastating impact of this invisible killer. From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
Downing Street has just confirmed that the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has tested positive for a coronavirus.
I've developed mild symptoms of the coronavirus, that's to say, a temperature and a persistent cough has saved my life, no question. I want you to know that this Easter Sunday, I do believe that your efforts are worth it and are daily proving their worth.
I'll get straight into the questions. Was it a strange experience learning from home?
Yes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say strange. I'd say a bit different.
Okay.
Because obviously it's not what I'm used to. A bit different from the classroom. But I wouldn't say it hindered any of the work that I got done.
I didn't really learn much, I don't think.
Oh.
Yeah, strange.
It was not fun because you had to be able to work and edit from home. So when we were recording footage, we had to then be able to edit from home.
Well, basically, we're so used to going into college, and at the time we were working on a lot of practical projects. I know me and Cameron and Jack were in a group with a few other people on the level 2 course. We were doing a lot of filming, we were doing green screen stuff, and obviously we couldn't access all that from home. I don't know, it just felt really weird.
Well, I've been so used to getting up early in the morning and go somewhere, but for the first couple of sessions online, I woke up around the same time, but the more we did it, the more I just started to feel like I'm slacking a bit, because just being at home and home being a relaxing space, it kind of just starts to get muddled up a bit. So it's very different.
That actually leads on to my next question. Was it hard to find the motivation to learn and do the work from home?
Yeah, I definitely think it was, like, I don't really have much of a setup, so it's normally just in my bed and with all the distractions around. So it was very distracting for me, I think.
Yeah.
Oh God, yes. Sometimes I'll literally just answer the call and then I'll probably just go back and lie in bed.
At points, like, if I knew, yes, I have to do this specific piece of work by such a due date, I would immediately go in and start the work and try to get it done as soon as possible. But if I've been told, like, oh, it's not due in for 2 months, I just kind of lay off a few days, start to relax even more than I would.
As head of the UCU Bridgewater and Taunton College branch, how would you best describe your role for the people watching?
Right, thank you. I think I might take issue slightly with your calling the role the head of the UCU Bridgewater and Taunton College branch, simply because we use the term chair. If at all possible, we like to think of the branch as being much more collaborative. But it is true, you're quite right, that probably for a number of people, and that might include people who are not members of the UCU as well, the University and College Union, people who know me around the college may well see me as the sort of face of the union.
Was it a strange experience teaching from home?
Oh, straight in with the good stuff then.
Most definitely.
I suppose it wasn't.
So obviously you get to know your students throughout the year, and then you have to completely change what you're doing, and you're having to work in new ways that you didn't think you'd have to work. You're having to deliver things that you're used to doing on like a face-to-face or one-to-one basis. And doing that via a camera actually it's really hard. It's very difficult.
So when it comes to this kind of situation, where suddenly we're in a situation where all students are being asked to be self-sufficient, you're at home, it's now up to you. No one's going to protect you. You have to be proactive to get onto a computer and operate in this particular way. I found some elements weren't strange because, well, I'm always using VLEs. I'm kind of trying to get students on to find the information for themselves.
Would you say it was difficult to teach online?
I would say it is quite difficult to teach online.
So literally, I've gone from kind of my class is this big to my class that I'm actually effectively able to teach is like suddenly this big. That, I'd argue, is the weirdest thing. That is what made it strange. Everything else I can cope with.
Obviously very new and very different for everybody involved in education, and yeah, kind of quite a steep learning curve, I think.
As part of a secondary school, do you think you were in an easier or harder position than further education like colleges or universities?
Oh, probably a little bit harder, because classes were much, much bigger. So we did all online lessons through Teams, and that was, well, this year we did anyway. And it was really tricky to get everybody there, which might have been easier if the classes were smaller.
Was it hard to find the motivation to work from home?
I don't think I struggled with the motivation to do it, but I think we didn't realise how much work it was going to be and how much pressure there was going to be on us to deliver well through these different media.
The longer it went on, yes, the harder it became. First lockdown, suddenly it was fun. I was okay, we've just got to keep them going. But this lockdown, the one Christmas that's just finishing in March, that was a lot harder because that was business as usual.
No, I don't think so, because you already had your timetable and you knew where you had to be at a certain time. However, I guess it was hard to stay focused because there are always so many other distractions around the home, like washing up or things like that. And like my son being home, he was always a distraction, and he will always be my priority. So even when I was teaching, if there was something wrong with him, I would have to kind of tend to him. So yeah.
I think they're managing it quite well, but the workload is still there. And I've noticed this within students, within staff, across a whole set of different regimes, people losing this motivation because you can't do the same amount of work because we are locked down. We aren't in that same situation. Trying to get the students to do the same amount of work, but even when we're trying to do it before the lockdown, on 2 days a week. Typically, the students are in 3 days a week and they have access to the facilities 5 days a week.
Yeah, it's a different sort of experience to being, obviously, if you're in the classroom, you might have a full timetable for that day, teaching different groups. But actually online, it did seem very much more sort of concentrated. So that was challenging.
Boris Johnson has announced that England will once again enter a period of lockdown tonight. England has now joined Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland in implementing tougher new restrictions faced with a surging number of new cases, are being asked to shield again, and all schools in England will be closed to most pupils with online learning until after the February half-term at the earliest.
There are many vulnerable and key worker children here who qualify to attend school, but overpopulating the classroom creates a risk. At a time, the virus is rapidly spreading through this town.
Lockdown restrictions in England will remain in place until at least the 8th of March, when schools in all parts of England might be allowed to reopen if the conditions are right. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said reopening schools any earlier could result in another surge in COVID cases.
Do you think mental health was made worse when we were in lockdown over winter? Because obviously a lot of people struggle with seasonal affective disorder. Me personally, I do. So do you think it was made worse over the winter?
Yes, I think that's a really interesting point. Not everyone recognises that they do experience some degree of seasonal affective disorder. I mean, you know, we're not Sweden, all right, but nevertheless, people are affected by the fact that it's dark when you leave home, it's dark when you get home. So I think the first lockdown at least allowed, I mean, I went out cycling a lot during the first lockdown on my own, obviously not many other people around, but I was able to get out. I didn't do that during the winter, partly because it was wet. I didn't trust the brakes on my bike and this sort of thing as well. But it was much more difficult to motivate myself to go out. And the winter lockdown, if we can characterize it as that, was experienced, I think, in a very different way from the summer lockdown. I certainly became much more introverted, and I wasn't communicating as well with other people.
How has it been going back to college after learning from home for so long?
It's kind of different because I've done something from home for such a long time. I got used to doing it, just like waking up and rolling over to my computer, and then that's it.
Very different.
I think it's been quite helpful in parts and quite strange in others, like with all the teachers actually being here, and I've gotten actually some work done.
For someone in your position who's only a first year student, is it weird for you because you're not used to the facilities, and so is it weird
Definitely,
that balance?
because there's a lack of practical which does affect our own learning. For example, I came into the course not knowing how to use a camera, and I thought I would learn how to use a camera in practical sessions, but no one ever taught the class how to, and they kind of just expected you to go off and do the work without knowing.
So how has the transition from at-home teaching to in-person teaching been?
It's been fantastic in terms of being able to rekindle those relationships with the students as well, and get that kind of rapport back up as well, because actually you find you lose that. Natural conversations that would happen in a classroom don't happen via a screen because actually people are waiting for other people to answer. And so for me, transitioning back to this has been really easy. It's all I've been looking forward to. And yeah, I've been fine transitioning back. It's been easy.
Coming out back to face, what I felt was almost this sense of relief. It was almost like, oh, thank God we're back on site. I've never, ever experienced in my teaching career ever a student say, oh, we need to be in college more. And actually having a level 2 student say that to me, in like, I think it was the first or second week back, it was like, this is quite weird.
As a secondary school, how was the transition from at-home learning to in-person teaching? How was that transition?
So for this year, we literally went down the route of all of our lessons were just as they would be in class. So we were still doing the do nows, and we still had, your outcomes. We still used worksheets. It was, we were very much just treating lessons as if we were all face to face, except that there was a screen in between us. So as much as possible, it was a case of, right, instead of seeing you through my camera, I'm now just going to see you back in the room again.
What was it like for you last year when the pandemic first hit? Like, how did it affect your education?
It was good in a way because the teacher was clear on what we had to do from home. They use Zoom. join on these days, you have to do this, you have to do that. So it's quite clear on what we had to do.
It was odd because no one knew what was going on. No one knew if the college was going to go into lockdown. We were setting up like work experience, stuff like that, and no one was 100% sure what's going on. And then obviously we get the message, oh, college won't be open, we're in lockdown now.
So do you think then you're in an easier, or you were in an easier position than GCSE kids?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'd say college is probably the best place to be at the moment because we're not in uni, but we just came out of school, so we're not worrying about GCSEs.
So how do you think it was GCSE students, so year 10s and 11s?
I think Michael Rosen's quote, "Dear Boris, you haven't cancelled exams, you've just called them assessments, except this year teachers get to mark them, and exam boards aren't," is pretty accurate. I think they're probably feeling quite stressed. In fact, I know they're feeling quite stressed, but we're just doing as much as we possibly can to sort of reduce that stress level.
So with the first lockdown and with your GCSE results, do you think the government handled that well?
I believe so, because trying to put a grade together is difficult, but the way that they did do it is something I would have done myself by putting together your mock grades and your in-class grades, because sometimes there are people who ace their tests but do terrible in class, but there are loads of people who do vice versa, and I think they did really well.
Do you think the government have learnt from last year? Do you think the handling of GCSEs this year is better than it was last year?
No, I don't. I think what they've done this year is they've tried to make it more robust and rigorous, but I don't think what they've done is better, because, as I just said, the quote is, they haven't gotten rid of GCSEs at all. They've just said, get them GCSEs, but get them different GCSEs, So every school will be sampled. It's going to be a random sample of random subjects and random students, which is absolutely fine. We will have that evidence. We'll be able to provide that evidence. But is that a better way of doing it when, with respect to yourselves, you guys got sent home in March with a couple of months left to go before your exams. Prior to that, you'd had no time out of school. You were just in and learning and finishing your coursework and everything else. Whereas, this year's year 11, they've had 22 weeks out of school.
Final question. What do you feel about the government's approach to education across these lockdowns? Do you think they've handled it well?
Ooh, good question.
No.
Are you allowed to swear in this?
Finally, what do you feel about the government's approach to education across all three lockdowns? Do you think they've handled the situation well?
They could have handled it better.
Not really. I think they could have done it a bit better.
They should have not opened it the first time.
Yeah.
Because then we would have been open sooner.
So you think they should have maybe waited to open? Yeah.
Maybe. I probably wouldn't have opened all the schools at once.
In general, I would characterise the government's approach to the whole crisis and to what's been happening or not happening in education as very often making the wrong decisions, and when they have made the right decision, it's always been too late.
Well, I think it's been, they've had to face a situation that is, new to them as well. So in fairness, it's a unique situation that they've been trying to cope with. I think it's been bumpy. I think there have been, some mistakes. I think looking back to last year with the, giving students results by algorithm and not trusting teachers to give centre assessed grades turned out to be wrong, I think.
I suppose you're talking about Gavin Williamson specifically, or the government in general. Neither have done a particularly good job. There's been confused messages, there's been mixed messages, there's been, I would say, specific disinformation spread from the government. I think some of it dangerous, some of it downright evil.
I think it's an absolute scandal, for example, that students at home are still paying for their accommodation at universities. And I think really the government should be doing something about that.
So, what about with college? Do you think there was good? Do you think the government handled that well?
Well, I think they should have initiated the lockdown much sooner and brought us in more gradually than they did.
The government guidance has been very often so late and so utterly vague.
I don't necessarily think they've handled the kind of vaccinations well. I think bringing everyone back and people not necessarily being, or teachers not being in the procedure to be vaccinated ASAP, I think maybe that could have been handled differently, because we are seeing hundreds of people every day, and there are people in the NHS on the front line that have been vaccinated that are in a similar situation.
And then I think when we came back after Christmas, we came back for just a day, wasn't it? I think it was, and then went into lockdown almost straight away. We were spending that time planning to do testing when students came in, and in the end they didn't, so we could have been actually planning online learning at that point.
They certainly learnt a little bit from last year's exam fiasco, which was dreadful really, and which is going to have a terrible knock-on effect for quite a long time to come because of the way that grades were assessed and all this sort of thing.
So the fact that then, well, everything else is still closed, let's get kids back face to face with teachers, quite often who are in vulnerable groups, so that's fine. And then they'll bring it from their households and pass it on to other households and do it. And we keep seeing this. This is one of the reasons why, the cases were dropping. We opened face-to-face schoolings, it levelled off. It didn't drop to zero, it levelled off.
I think they've communicated between each other very well, but not communicated it to the actual students and what they're doing. And things like the U-turn is just a bit more confusing and unfair for students, because then it's like, oh, we've got to revise now. Oh no, we don't have to.
So do you think that's a communication issue with the government or with the college?
With the government.
I hope that everybody across the whole college is thinking a little bit more about each other. I mean, that's our raison d'etre as union members. We join a union to support each other. But I think there's no reason why someone has to join a union to do that. And all students should be thinking about each other and of the colleagues that they work with, the staff members they work with. And as members of staff, I hope that we will all think a little bit more about each other and of our students and some of the things that they may be going through silently as a result of this lockdown as well.
So I think summing up, I think it's been a bit of a bumpy ride, and I think there's been some mistakes along the way. But it's a unique situation, so I think everyone's trying to do the best that they can in a way.